Well, it's a little before 11 o'clock Central Standard Time in Kansas City and Kansas and Missouri. This is the third Deep Background Special Edition on video at kansascity.com tonight. I'm Dave Helling with the Star's editorial board, and my friend and colleague Jonathan Shorman, the lead political reporter at the Star, joins us now for sort of a wrap-up analysis of what voters are telling us. So tell me, Jonathan, what the hell are they saying?
Well, first off, it's kind of past my bedtime. So had some Red Bull a little bit earlier, but so I would say, so look, since we were on at 9, we've had now the calls in for Ballier in the U.S. Senate race in the call for Marshall in the U.S. Senate race in Kansas, the call for Governor Parson in Missouri. We've had the House races in Kansas. Jake LaTurner versus Michelle De La Isla in the second. Sharice Davids, I believe the Sharice Davids race has been called.
It has been.
Okay, so basically all of those races, the outstanding significant races, have been more or less resolved. I think if you're Kansas or Missouri Republican tonight, you're probably looking at maybe potentially a few state house losses, but overall on the big ticket items, you're probably feeling pretty good. And especially on the Missouri side, it does appear, not called yet, but it does appear that Amendment 3 kind of changed the redistricting process that was championed by Republicans. It appears like that is narrowly passing at this point, which is probably a bit of a bonus for Missouri Republicans tonight.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see. But wouldn't you, maybe you agree or disagree with this, John? The biggest surprise tonight is no surprises at all. I mean, is there one race anywhere in our region, in the two-state region, or really in the nation, where you look and say, wow, that's really surprising. I didn't think that was going to happen. Now, I did just see that Anthony Hensley, who's been in the Kansas legislature longer than anyone in history, is in danger of losing his reelection, which would really be a stunner. I've known Anthony forever, as most Kansans have. But beyond that, the isolated surprise state house race, it seems like, and I just was on Channel 4 talking about this, it seems as if we are all so dug in to whatever position we have that the ability to sort of influence events, influence elections just seems very reduced now. Am I wrong? Are you there?
Yeah. Hey, I must have froze.
I put you to sleep, I'm sure. But I mean, let me just... it seems as if it's a status quo election. Roger Marshall, status quo. Sharice Davids, status quo. Mike Parsons, status quo. It just seems as if the voters are sending two very different messages, but they're not very different than they were 48 hours ago.
It's kind of like we're playing the same song on the jukebox,
yes,
just turning up the volume a little bit.
Yes. Do you think that's right?
Yeah, I think certainly as it applies, I can't speak nationally, but certainly as it applies to Missouri and Kansas, I think you're right. We haven't seen much in the way of surprising outcomes, at least so far this tonight, and certainly not on any of the upper line races. And I think, part of that is probably, you're right, the polarization in society, and just what the kind of phenomenon of negative partisanship sometimes, which is not so much your affiliation with your party, but a feeling of being opposed to the other party, which I think can be prevalent at times. So yeah, I think generally speaking, you're right. We really have not been shocked by anything we've seen so far in either state.
Yeah, I'd put it another way. We don't know how the presidential is going to turn out, which is its own story, Jonathan. But it's possible, maybe likely at this point, that the Senate will remain in Republican hands. There are a few changes, but at least that's a possibility. and the House will remain in Democratic hands, and Donald Trump could return to the White House. And in essence, after a year of pandemic, after a year of Black Lives Matter, of economic collapse, of quarantine, we will be in the same position tomorrow that we were in Monday.
Yeah. Well, what is perhaps an even potentially, to me, a very interesting scenario that seems to be at least possible at this moment is the idea that the Senate remains in Republican hands, but possibly maybe Joe Biden has a narrow electoral college victory and he is president. And we have this kind of era, we continue this era of divided government, which I think would be certainly a lot of what the Democrats want to do, more or less, does depend on the idea that they would potentially control all of Congress plus the presidency. I think you're going to be looking at a lot of a stalemate and standoff, certainly if we continue to just maybe swap out the presidency, but still more or less have at least Republican control of the Senate.
The other thing I'd like to chat about a little bit, Jonathan, is you've covered state governments for a long time. I've never seen the difference between rural interests and urban interests so precisely split. I mean, you can, again, in every state, but Kansas and Missouri are good examples. You can look at the returns from Roger Marshall or Mike Parson or any statewide race, and it just seems like 90% of the countryside's going for Republicans, 90% of the city streets are going for Democrats. How do we find common ground there, or can we?
I think, well, that's kind of an existential question, I guess.
It's 11 o'clock. We can go there.
Just one thing I guess I would observe is, some of these urban-rural divisions that were pre-existing, the coronavirus pandemic in some way has just kind of even brought them into sharper relief, possibly because there is at least a significant sense of difference in how rural areas versus suburban areas and urban areas want to approach handling this virus. And I think that kind of probably heightened the awareness of some of these divisions even more so than we would see in a normal year.
But I think COVID is a perfect example of the problem, because I think you're exactly right. It's a very urban-rural split on response to the coronavirus. So how do you solve it on a statewide basis when there's so much fundamental disagreement? I mean, where is the common ground, if you will, on something like COVID in a state like Missouri or Kansas? It's just very hard to see. And I think that extends to other issues as well. I mean, you start, education or criminal reform or budget or tax policy. It just seems like there's so few places for people to stand on the same piece of ground based on what we're seeing tonight.
Yeah, there's a lot of difference, sharp difference, at least on the pandemic. I mean, the decision by voter. I mean, Galloway and Parson presented a very clear contrast on how they were going to handle this, and the choice of voters apparently appears to be siding with kind of Parson's more less restrictive approach, generally local control, leaving decisions on rules about masks and other regulations in the hands of cities and counties. So.
And one would guess in Kansas, and you've covered Kansas, of course, the pressure on Laura Kelly, who faces the voters in 2 years, on this issue will be intense. I mean, it isn't like the Western Kansas counties, which have won this referendum, are suddenly going to say, no, masks are fine, statewide order is fine. I mean, the conflict between Kelly, the Democrat, and the Republican legislature will, one assumes, be even greater in 2021.
Yeah, I think there's even been some suggestion that perhaps Governor Kelly could call a special session to deal with this mask issue. I don't know if that'll end up taking place or not. But I think what we're kind of waiting to see with the legislative results in Kansas right now is how strong of a hand could Kelly go into the session come January to be able to kind of extract some progress on a mask mandate or some additional concessions from Republicans, and it's not real clear right now. But I don't want to speak too far in the future, because certainly this is a fast-moving situation, and with any hope, by the end of next year, we will hopefully think of this coronavirus pandemic as something that's hopefully mostly in the past.
Let's hope that's true. Okay, let's wrap up with a discussion of the political landscape in both states tonight. I want to start in Missouri because I'm fascinated by the potential collision involving some of the middle level figures of the Republican Party. Now, Roy Blunt, of course, is on the ballot in 2 years, assuming he wants to run again, and every indication is that he does want to do that. But you've got Jay Ashcroft, you've got Eric Schmidt, you've got Josh Hawley, clearly ambitious. I'm not sure where Mike Parson fits in there or not. By the way, did Missouri 2 go to Joe Shoup, or did Wagner win there? I haven't even looked.
I want to say I'm not even so sure.
I'll go back and look
before we went on air.
But the general point, I think, is valid, that there are ambitious politicians at that middle level, and we don't know whether Mike Parson will run again for a re-election in 4 years, but he will have served as governor for 6, so it's possible he might want to hang up his boots.
Well, my understanding actually is, I believe under the rules, how they're structured, he won't be
eligible.
I don't think he's eligible.
That's interesting, because we heard different today, but you may be right. We'll have to look that up. But for a moment, put him aside. Sure. The Republican Party in Missouri has a bit of a traffic jam coming, don't they?
Yeah, I think certainly you have. Take Roy Blunt. He's certainly been in the Senate long enough now that he is one of the more senior members, and I think that is certainly an attractive position that you would think would weigh heavily in favor of him wanting to kind of continue on in service. Josh Hawley, a relatively new to the Senate, yet very much a kind of a national voice, especially on tech issues and in certain segments of the kind of the conservative intelligentsia.
Right. The post-Trump era, if you will.
Right. Kind of the idea of someone who could potentially articulate what kind of the Trump philosophy is after Trump is no longer in the White House. Although that said, we still don't know how the presidency is going to turn out, obviously.
Right.
But yeah, I think you have potentially a lot of ambitious Republicans in Missouri at the moment, and it will be really interesting to see kind of how the chess pieces move.
Who do the Democrats have?
Well, Galloway is still in office as state auditor. I think this has even further raised her profile statewide. It's not clear to me what potentially might be ahead for her after a term as auditor, but I think this has been an experience that has certainly kind of elevated her profile, and I think there are, even though she obviously did not win, I think there are Democrats that were happy with the race that she ran.
Yeah. Any other Democrats come to mind? By the way, I was just looking at Jill Shoup. She's ahead, but only with about a third of the vote recorded in Missouri too. So we'll watch that. But I guess my bigger point in Missouri is the Democrats have some work to do, right? I mean, you can't hang your hat on Nicole Galloway for anything, and we have no idea who might run against, for example, Roy Blunt in 2 years. I mean, you might just not pursue that race, but that would be saying something about Democrats. We don't have a sense of that at all.
Yeah, I think, and part of this issue also comes back to term limits, where you are kind of pushing people through the political system much faster than, say, in Kansas, where a Democrat like Anthony Hensley, for instance, or Tom Sawyer or whoever can really develop a reputation and a position over a number of years before ever contemplating kind of a run for higher office. You don't have those kind of same opportunities in Missouri.
Yeah, I just did a quick search, and it seems as if Missouri voters are rejecting a term limit for lieutenant governor and attorney general and some other jobs, which were the question one, amendment one on the ballot. And it looks like Missourians are turning that down. So it means a guy like Eric Schmidt could be an attorney general for a long time if that's what he wants to do, or Jay Ashcroft as well. Okay, Kansas, and then we'll wrap up. Well, what are we looking at in Kansas now? I mean, obviously Roger Marshall is one of the leaders of the Republican Party now, along with Jerry Moran, who I think is also on the ballot in 2022.
Right.
Here's my big, bold prediction. He may not run again. I know that he sometimes gets quite frustrated with Washington, although I have no inside information, no leaks, no sources. It's just a guess. But so it's Marshall and Moran, and and a war in Topeka next year.
Yeah. I think I think you're right. I think going forward, probably the next real kind of parlor game in Kansas is going to be kind of murmurs about the 2022 governor's race on the Republican side anyway, and who the potential contenders could be there.
You hear Sue Wagle. You hear Sue Wagle's name, don't you?
Yeah, I certainly I think you could imagine any number of the people that we just saw, either from the last gubernatorial primary or from even this past Senate primary,
right?
Kind of taking a run at it. Certainly, Jeff Collier is still in Kansas. We could hear from our friend Chris Kobach again.
Amanda Atkins.
Amanda.
I mean, she might have statewide appeal that would be more difficult to find in the 3rd district. I mean, the Republicans will not lack for candidates.
Yeah, I think they have a number of options, and I think it's a matter of kind of who can start to move the chess pieces around in a way that kind of attracts attention.
All right, Jonathan Shorman, do you have any Red Bull left? Because we can't go to bed now. We've got to know who the president of the United States is going to be. We'll have to wait a little bit at least for that answer. You've been great tonight. I appreciate the chat. And the work again begins anew tomorrow, as they say. Thanks so much for being with us. Again, Jonathan Shorman, thanks. I'm Dave Helling with the Stars Editorial Board, and thank you for watching. You've been on Deep Back.